Welcome, everybody. So, Mentor Night. If you did not get a sheet in the back, there's a sheet for mentors and mentees. I just need one turned in at the end of the night. We have our speaker from NDSU, Samantha. She's going to talk about handling stress and our social media intake, and she does a really good job. And then you guys will have about 20 minutes to disperse throughout the church. And then we'll meet back here at 7:50 to hear about our Pay It Forward opportunity through Bell Bank. So help me welcome Samantha up to us.
Hi, everybody. How's it going tonight? Good, good. I see head nods. Yeah, it's going good. Okay, that's great. As Tyler kindly introduced, my name is Samantha. I'm Samantha Archer. I am currently a third-year PhD student in the Department of Communication at NDSU. And I also am an adjunct instructor at Concordia College too. So to introduce myself a little bit, thank you to my slides person, they're already ahead of me. That's a little bit about myself. As far as the courses that I've taught, just to kind of give you an idea of where I'm coming from and the credibility that I have to speak on this topic. Specifically, I've taught courses in human communication, interpersonal communication, intercultural communication, public speaking. My dissertation work specifically looks at how people engage in conflict on social media. So a lot of self-censorship on political discussions and how we basically handle those types of conversations. But as a PhD in communication, it's my goal to kind of look at communication as it is, as an interaction, right? But today, what I'm specifically aiming to talk to you about is digital stress, right? And stress in relation to our personal technology use. So what I will say on the next slide is that what this presentation is not, and I've already heard some people say things along this line, my goal is not to give you a prescription for the best or the healthiest ways to use technology. That is not my goal. This is not also a clear-cut guide for limiting technology use in the home. Some parents are like, dang it, I thought she was gonna say, cut the TikTok. No, I'm not going to say that. And I'm also not going to say that this is an opportunity for any one social media site to be banned or considered bad within the home. Okay, so I'll just lay those ground rules right away. But what this presentation is a chance for you and your mentor-mentee relationship to think critically about both our societal understandings of technology, our personal technology use, as well as the impact that that has on you and your relationships. And so with that said, I'm going to start off with a discussion question, because this is usually how I lead my lectures at both colleges. They all know that I'm a discussion-based teacher. And I'm going to ask you to engage in a think, pair, share. So I want you to think, reflect on this question, pair together with your mentor or mentee, and I want you to share what you think about this. I will preface that there is no right answer for any of these things, so please be creative in your thoughts. But my question for you is, are social media bad for you? Okay? My definition is any media that encourages us to be social, right? That's my definition of social media. So things such as Facebook, smartphones, Snapchat, TikTok, whatever you think. Are social media bad for you? Take just a couple minutes and think on this and discuss this with the person next to you. And I will ask for some opinions, so prepare to share. All right, I know all of you are having really great and insightful discussions, and we'll continue that as the night goes on. But would anybody like to share, like, are social media bad for you? Like, what do we think about this? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, there are some really great aspects to social media, right? Um, Particularly like with regards to small businesses, you're absolutely right that we can engage with those businesses virtually and that can help them gain traction. What else do we think about this? Do we think that social media, are they bad for you? What do we think? What other opinions do we have? Yeah, I see some like things. Okay, that's kind of like, honestly, most times what I hear from people. I'm gonna go to the next slide, and I'm gonna pose the question, good or bad, why do we use social media? Beyond the scope of supporting small businesses, what might be another reason why we use social media? Anybody that would like to like throw an answer out? What's that? To stay connected. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Social media is inherently used to sustain personal connection, right? And that's an inherent part of my discussion today. That at the end of the day, it's really easy for us to fall into a trap societally thinking that technology is inherently bad for us. And what I will say that is that technology is a source for us to engage in social connection, to stay connected to other people, but there are some boundaries with that, right? And there's some stress that can arise from our need to connect with people, and that's where we get a little bit of tension with our understandings of social media. On my next slide, we all know this, that the impact of smartphones and social media on our well-being has become an increasingly prevalent concern, right? I feel like we hear it around every corner. We all talk about how social media is bad for us in this way or bad for us in that way. If we go to the next slide, I have a couple of things to talk about, right? As a society, we tend to think that technology is bad for us. We might hear things like, watching all that TV will rot your brain. How many of us have heard that? Okay, yeah, I don't know why that's so common. We talk about that. We hear that video games are making our children violent, even though there is substantial evidence to prove that that is not the case. We also say that social media is making your child depressed, or you are becoming depressed because of your social media use. And I argue that meaningful stressors certainly can arise from technology, right? We all know that. But the stress is not caused by the technology itself, okay? Like the technology that we are using inherently is not the problem at hand. Now, on my next slide, I explain that it's because of how we use our media. That's why it matters, right? At my last lecture, I asked the person, well, good or bad, why do we use it? And a kid raised his hand and it said, well, social media isn't inherently bad, but it is how you engage with that media that makes it bad, right? There is some power that exists within us to control some of those variables. Stress related to technology use stems from, not from the technology itself, but from how we use it. And digital stress arises when technology interferes with our sense of control and when technology is not meeting those social connection needs, right? They're not fulfilling those basic needs that we flock to social media for. Because it is inherently social, we use it for connection. So today I want to talk with you about 3 different types of digital stress. That is availability stress, approval anxiety, and FOMO, okay, or fear of missing out. There are multiple different kinds of stress that we experience across social media. These aren't all encompassing, but they are certainly 3 out of 5 or 6 that we've identified across research that are quite pronounced. So let's start off by talking a little bit about availability stress. Since the widespread use of smartphones, we know that the demand to be available is seen as a source of stress, right? That we are constantly feeling the need to be connected. Social media, in particular apps or chatting apps such as Messenger and WhatsApp, offer a near constant stream of contact with people, right? That at any hour of the day, at any time of night, right, we can get notifications from people, or we can be in contact with anybody that we want across the span of the whole entire globe. Research has essentially found that adolescents experience social pressure to be available. This extends beyond adolescents and into college students. They have reported that they feel the pressure to stay connected to friends no matter the place or the time. And we also experience this in adulthood, right? It's something that expands across the period of your life, right? Availability demands have been a predictor of stress and also depression in adults. I'm sure at some point in your life, whether or not you are young and just newly introduced to media, or older and have been more experienced with it, you've probably experienced this at some point. Putting this into perspective, this can look like a number of things, but here are just a couple examples. So when your smartphone buzzes or dings with a notification and you feel the urgent need to check it, right? Like you need to be available to that technology, you need to check it. Or when you feel that you cannot leave someone on a read receipt, okay, in fear that they may be upset or offended that you didn't respond. Have any of us ever felt that way? I know, yeah, right? That if you have that option, right, you want to be responsive, you want to be available, you want to be there for your friends or your family. So I have a discussion question for you to go over with the people next to you. And that is, have you ever experienced the stress of needing to be available? And what did this look like? How did it make you feel? And how can you work together to alleviate this type of problem in the future? So as a mentor-mentee relationship, I want you to talk about, especially mentors, if your mentee hasn't experienced something like this, like how'd that feel for you, right? What did that look like for you? And how can you perhaps make a plan to alleviate this type of stress in the future? So I will give you a couple minutes to get together and discuss this with each other. I'm gonna call you back up to the front here in the center. I'm not gonna call on anybody because I realize I've already spoke a little too much. But I want you to keep these discussions in mind as you move forward and as you talk about these things more in depth later. But what I do have to say about this is that if you have experienced this, availability stress, in my opinion, and across the research, is not strictly a result of technology, but it is a response to certain societal and relational norms, right? Of being available, of being responsive immediately to our people and to our loved ones, right? So as you move forward and as you think about these topics, think about how do we shift that narrative, right? That it is a stress for us to be constantly connected. How can we shift the narrative and step away from that type of stress? We're going to move on to the next type of stress, which is approval anxiety. I'm sure all of us have experienced this as well, but this is the degree of uncertainty and anxiety about others' responses and reactions to our posts, our photos, or the messages that we share, right? We use social media to craft highly controlled impressions of ourselves, right? These are usually accurate, believe it or not. A lot of people think that we are getting catfished all the time by people, and that's not necessarily true, but we do use social media to present the things that we want other people to know and see about us, right? Excluding the bad stuff, like the teenage acne years, and you know what I mean, all those things for parents. But approval anxiety is influenced by age and social development across research, right? So adults and adolescents alike may use social media for things like social comparison, right? We use social media to look at other people and to compare where we are in life with where they are at in life. But association between time on Facebook and depressive symptoms are basically very evident across the research. And this is resulting from social comparison behavior, right? So we know that this is a type of anxiety or a type of stress that is present on social media. And this can look like a number of things as well. So say you post an important life update on social media and it doesn't garner as much traction as you thought it would. Maybe it didn't get as many likes or reactions as you thought it should, right? That is a type of approval anxiety, that if you are not getting those reactions, that might not be, I don't know, that important to anybody else. We also know that perhaps we post something on social media, or someone posts an embarrassing memory on our wall or our news feed, right, that we don't want other people to see, that disrupts our ability to craft that highly controlled impression of ourselves, right? That would be a form of approval anxiety as well. And lastly, you need to utilize something like a perfect filter, right, to remove your blemishes, or to even fit in with your friends who are doing the same thing. These would all be forms of things that we seek to get approval from other people. So my discussion question for you, and we'll do this very briefly again, I want you to describe a time in which you have experienced something like this online. How did it feel, and what did you do as a result? So get together with people next to you and discuss. All right, I'm gonna call you back up again. I know I'm not giving you nearly enough time. I feel like we could talk about these things for hours. And if you're after today, I would be happy to discuss them with you as well. But my opinion on this is that approval anxiety, while it is something that is enhanced by technology, right? It results from more so our societal expectations of what is trending, what is hip, what is attractive, right? That it's not the technology that's causing the problem, but it's how we are looking at that technology and how we are using it that shapes that problem as well. So as you are looking at these things and taking them into consideration, think about like, well, if I experience that, why is that, right? That's a lot of the questions that we should be asking ourselves, not just assuming that the technology is inherently the problem. The last one I'm going to talk to you about today is the fear of missing out. Y'all know what this is. I know. FOMO. All of you have experienced it, but to give you the academic definition, it is the stress resulting from real, perceived, or anticipated social consequences of others engaging in rewarding experiences from which one is absent, okay? Your friends are doing something fun and you can't be there, but you have to see it on social media, right? So when everybody is going to Mexico and having great tropical vacations while we're stuck in the still winter, right? You might experience fear of missing out. Yeah, some people are like, totally. Yes. Unsurprisingly, FOMO has been associated with poor mood and depression, right? That studies have found this in the past. And the degree to which that post is visible contributes to this, right? Especially for adolescents and young adults, that the more they engage with platforms that have increased visibility of these kind of posts, the more FOMO they'll probably experience. So putting this into perspective, perhaps you come across photos, again, of friends who are on vacation, posting photos of great seafood and white sand beaches, and you are here in the wind and the snow and the rain. Or perhaps you were invited to go to a concert, but you couldn't because you had to work or you had homework, right? And now your newsfeed is filled with check-ins and photos of that said concert, and you did not get to experience that. It's not very fun, is it? It's not fun to see everybody else enjoying the world while we are not enjoying those parts of the world, and that can result in stress. So my discussion question for you, and this will be the last one of the day before I kind of give you my opinions, is how has FOMO affected you recently or in the past? And what can you do to alleviate something like this? So get together with people next to you and discuss for just a couple minutes. I'm going to call you up to the front one last time, and I promise that after this, I will soon be done talking to you. My one piece of advice, and it goes back to the previous slide, is that using platforms with higher visibility results in greater FOMO, right, most times. So if you find yourself at risk for fear of missing out, perhaps reducing your usage of those high visibility platforms like Instagram, Facebook. I know that's not in nowadays, but I find that hard to believe. TikTok, I'm sure, is in there as well. But what can we make of this presentation, right? Like, I've thrown a lot at you in a short amount of time and barely given you enough time to talk through these things. But what I want you to take away from this is that issues that stem from social media are much less to do with the technology itself, but how we make do with that technology. So how we, as an individual and also as a society, how we use that technology, right? That, again, like, technology exists, but how do we engage in that, and how does that consequently impact our lives? So some takeaways or things to consider moving forward. You'll probably find this especially helpful for parents. Having open and honest conversations about stress through or about technology, right? As a communication PhD, I will always encourage people to communicate, right? Talk about these things. Like, we don't talk about them enough. So talk about, what does that look like for you in your life? How have you experienced that? And we can also set mindfulness goals about technology, but recognize that for all of adolescence, and I don't often throw out that big of a word, but it's an unavoidable way for us to connect with friends, right? It's an unavoidable future that we have, that technology will always be present. We might as well accept that, right? But how can we set goals about mindfulness surrounding that technology use? We can also aim to set reasonable expectations for alleviating stressors. So for instance, with regard to approval anxiety, right, just solidifying that fact that we do not need to seek approval because of societal expectations, but because of personal expectations. We need to seek approval for ourselves and not for other people. And then lastly, just recognize when someone might be secluding into technology for reasons other than social connection. That also becomes a problem, right? So say people are using technology to avoid. They're using it as a mode of distraction, or perhaps it's becoming a source of conflict amongst friends and things like that. That's when we can start to, again, employ these conversations about what's happening, why is that happening, and what can we do? What power do we have to change that stress that exists in our life? I hope that makes sense. But I appreciate you listening to me today and for having me at your mentor-mentee night. And if you have any questions, I'll be here after to talk, but thank you.
All right, so with that, I don't feel like I need to wrap up too much. Tonight is a great night of intergenerational activity. It's good to have open communication. We haven't had that the last 2 years. So we're thankful to be in person. And then just have open, honest discussion. We had this as a topic, not out of a place of shame. Sometimes we can feel guilty about things that we do online, and a reason why we come to church is to hear sometimes that we have sinful ways and we run the opposite direction. If you've come to church before, you will hear that. You run the opposite direction of sin, and we hope tonight that you guys have open and honest conversation and just reflect with one another about your social media connections. And I know kids use Snapchat a lot and TikTok, so that's what you guys are on. So you guys are free to disperse throughout the church until 7:50, and then we have a pay it forward activity, and I need one of those sheets from a mentor or mentee at the end of the night. Thank you.